Welcome to another episode of the Product Disorder podcast. And today we have Diogo and Sebastian with us. We are going to discuss product roadmaps and everything around them. And yes, I think we can kick it off by defining a little bit what is a roadmap and why do we need one. And I think, Diogo, you might have something nice to share.
I don't know if nice, but first of all, thank you very much for having me here and for taking this time to be with me and to listen to what I have to say. Hope it pays off. We were talking a little bit before about roadmaps and how it's not always clear what everyone means when they say roadmap, and each one of us kind of have our own little definitions. A roadmap is, I would say, for sure essential for anyone trying realistically to work in product and to build anything. But what that means in terms of how you communicate it, how you visualize it, to who you communicate it, what is the granularity, what is the time horizon, this all varies from person to person. And yeah, that's what kind of makes the discussion a little bit harder, don't you feel?
I think there is a different perception. I mean, there could be a different understanding of what is a roadmap based on the person backgrounds. They might have a different definition. And I think that shouldn't be the case, really. I think whenever you are talking a roadmap in your organization or with anyone, that you actually have a common understanding of what is that and create that definition together. Hopefully you can use the one that, kind of the official definition of a roadmap. But of course, maybe there is a need in a specific organization to actually create your own definition of roadmap because of the specifics of your product.
But hey, roadmap is just a plan, right? And I fully understand why people that are like, let's say, agile evangelists would be like, why are we doing roadmaps and planning the future out for 1-2 years time when we're supposed to be agile and we're supposed to not have a plan and react to the market and react to how people use the tool or product or whatever. But you also just have to know that you need to make some plans, right? Plans can change, and I think that's back to some World War II, I don't know, general that said all plans change when they hit the field or whatever, right? But you need to make plans because you need to have budgets, you need to allocate money. It's a company. You need to forecast somehow. You need to create some certainty about what's going on. So for me, you need to have a roadmap. I fully understand why you don't want to have one, but you need to be able to communicate what's going on and what will happen in the future, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was so Mike Tyson said something somewhat similar. It's like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. That's sometimes happens when you're doing product, right? You get punched in the face. I would say the roadmap is important not only from a business perspective, as you were arguing, I think, Sebastian, but also very much so from a technical perspective, right? One of the main tenets that at least I try to instill to the team that I work on is to not develop ourselves into a cul-de-sac. Right? Because sometimes you do things without knowing what's coming in the future, and you find it hard to get away from where you develop yourself into. If you know where you're going, then you reduce the likelihood that will happen. And that's the main reason from a technical perspective where I think roadmaps are very important as well.
Yeah, because then you have a vision, you kind of know where you're headed towards, right? Yeah. And you break it down and figure out how we're going to get there. And maybe, hopefully, the vision is a little bit vague. Like, we need to win the war. That's the vision. How we're going to do it, we'll find out, right? But we have an assumption. We have an idea that we're going to start on this beach. We're going to then head to this country and see what's going to happen or whatever, right?
As to what you were saying, Elena, regarding the definition of roadmap, right? I would argue for many such definitions, right? I don't think that if I'm talking with my team, let's say, and I want to present a roadmap to them, I don't think the message should be the same as the message that I present to my administration, for example, right? They need a longer horizon, probably less details for sure, maybe not such a technical roadmap, but more of a goals and objectives side. So not what I'm going to do, but what I'm going to achieve. And with the team, we do need that. We do need more detail. I was actually just in a meeting with my team today, and I was saying, look, the minimum we should have is the next 2 sprints plan, right? And many would argue that's not a roadmap, but it is a plan, as you were saying, Sebastian, right? So for the short term, we have a very detailed idea of what's going to happen. For the next 3 months, maybe a little bit less. For the next 6 months, less even. For the next year, maybe wishes more than a plan.
But I guess one argument against the roadmaps that I hear is that roadmaps are always out of date, because you create them often a static document, a slide, and the moment you've made it is out of date. So you get a lot of backlash against also spending your time making these artifacts because they're static and no one uses them that often. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Completely. I think it's a misconception to believe that a roadmap is a static document. A document is a living, breathing document. I think the standard definition, right? Or if you went down in the street and you asked 100 people what a roadmap is, you would get maybe 70 different answers. But one that would be recurrent is it's next year's plan, right? I think that's the most standard one. I would argue, or rather, I would prefer to, if I had complete liberty, and that's also another thing, you don't always have complete liberty to define the roadmap as you want to. If I did, I would most likely do a rolling 6 months roadmap, right? So every month, every quarter, updating the roadmap because you have always new information, you have things that went well, things that didn't, new market research, new technology coming, and in that way you manage the roadmap more so than you create the roadmap.
But
I actually think this is happening anyway, that you make a preliminary plan for the year, but because it's not a static one, and hopefully most people, in organizations hopefully are aware of that, but because it's not a static plan, you reassess it, and I think it's very often like a quarterly exercise that you do to basically assess and be like, okay, so then next quarter, are we then still on that plan? Are we on track? Or we actually want to introduce something else, remove something, reprioritize, make a new plan? And that's exactly what you're saying. I think it's just that the culture for creating roadmaps is looking at it in a year. And I think that's also because of the fiscal year and how budgeting works, right? But the reality is you are adjusting it and working on it the entire year.
But let's talk a little bit about what our favorite roadmaps are, because what you're saying, Elena, and I think you see that in a lot of organizations. Let's either do the roadmap in quarters or per quarter, and maybe let's do it for the 1 year. And I think you said rolling 6 months, Diego, right? Mm-hmm. But I would argue your roadmap should be much, much longer. Because otherwise, how do you know you're achieving your vision and getting to your vision? If you're doing 1 quarter at a time, I would say you might as well not do your roadmap, because all you have is a couple of sprints. Like you how do you know you're actually heading the right way? And do you have any metrics that you're achieving your vision, right? Like leading indicators. But let's talk a little bit about how you guys would do roadmaps. I think that would be kind of interesting to hear.
How we would do roadmaps?
Yeah, like what is your favorite roadmap? Because now that we're talking, I guess I'm actually arguing against having short roadmaps or doing them for a short time. Actually, what I want is probably a much longer roadmap that shows how we're going to go all the way to, let's say, the achieving the vision in a way, right? Or achieving parts of the vision.
Yeah. But I think that brings us all the way around into the beginning of the conversation and definitions of roadmaps, right? Because what you're calling a long-term roadmap, I would simply call a product vision, right? Which is that it is a roadmap for the long term, not so much of a working document, but more of a mission statement. What we want to do, who we want to be, what are the goals we want to achieve. And goals is maybe interesting in this context because you might want to have a roadmap that says, I'm going to do this screen in this month and that screen on the other month, and then refactor the backend and so on. So a very descriptive roadmap. Or you might have a roadmap that says, by January next year, I want to have 100,000 customers. And I think that's a very valid way to build a roadmap, giving more liberty to the teams and setting objectives, targets for them.
Yeah, and I think I'm arguing for the same. Like the vision or the mission, separate documents. Your
Mhm.
roadmap, ideally a living document, but I would probably have it for quite some time. Like maybe I'm even arguing for, let's set a 5-year roadmap,
Mhm.
because if you set it that way, you probably force yourself to set it as business objectives or outcomes that you want to achieve, and then you don't focus too much on how we're going to do that. You could maybe leave that up to the teams to
Yeah.
define how we're going to achieve those targets instead, right?
I think that's really contingent, though, to the maturity of the organization, right? Depending on who you're dealing with, same as in general with the roadmaps, right? I think one thing that makes people maybe not so inclined to work on roadmaps, or at least not so appreciative of that, is that in some organizations, especially bigger organizations, the roadmap will be used more so as a weapon than necessarily a guide, right? And that's why people shy away from it. In some more mature organizations, you will have this interconnection between development and business, where the business sets high level goals and development picks those up and implements them. In others, there's just not enough liberty for that, or not enough um, shared consensus for that, in a sense, right? So depending on how you're working and who you're working with, that vision of a roadmap is much easier to implement than in other places.
Such an interesting point, how your roadmap can be a tool or weapon used against you,
Yeah,
because the moment you put pen and paper to something, you're committing to it, right? And even though you're setting this is not a commitment, this is what we're thinking we should be doing to achieve the vision, it can still be used like, well, you're like, when is this feature being launched? You promised it last year, because in June. We've been
yeah.
waiting, right? um,
Or that's a perennial feature that is always 6 months delayed, right? It's
yes,
always 6 months
yes,
delayed, but it's in the roadmap for 2 years. Like, yeah.
yes. That's
Um,
so funny. But then, so Diego, are you saying that there's not an ideal way to do a roadmap? It all depends, or do you still have a preference to doing roadmaps in a certain way?
I would say it all depends, and maybe it depends more so on yourself, right? So for me, I think there's an ideal roadmap that I would like to have. Doesn't mean that that has to be the ideal for you and for Elena, and doesn't mean that it has to be the ideal for every company I'm working with. I've been fortunate enough to work with companies where I had 5 colleagues or 500 colleagues, right? And maybe the idea that the same roadmap works as well for both cases is, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's true. I haven't found that roadmap. So if you do, tell me. Let me know.
So if you were to do a roadmap to communicate what will happen for the next X amount of time, primarily upwards towards management,
Mhm.
how would you actually design that? What would be your way of doing it?
Ideally, I would pick out a couple of more significant features, try to explain those, and give a general idea of when I would like to deliver those, and more importantly, associate those with business results, right? So these are the ideas that will give you X, right? And I think that's how I'd go upwards. So not a lot of detail, not a lot of commitment. So maybe not a month by month roadmap, but maybe a quarter by quarter roadmap, or a semester by semester, depending on what the time frame is. If I'm going down, then it's the other way around, right? Then I want maybe even sprint by sprint. And then I want more detailed information, right? I want specific screens. I want specific services for the team also to contribute towards that, because they need to validate the roadmap, and for them to have the security that we all know what we're doing and we're aligned.
But I'm hearing that you would put time on one axis, specific times, and you would also put features, so actually deliverables, together with the business results on your roadmap. Is that correctly understood?
High level features, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, to pick up an abstract example, we're dealing with some crypto wallet, right? I would say integrate with, or rather enable us to use Bitcoin, rather than say I need to be able to buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin, and so on, right? So high level features and not low level features.
What about you, Elena? What is your ideal way to do a roadmap? You could decide.
I think I like to make the longer term plan is what you said, but that is quite high level. I think that's more strategical of the items that I would like to address in a year. Maybe it could be longer than a year, or maybe I will be creating already the understanding that if we have a little bit more specific idea what we want to do this year, there is this backlog of items that I believe strategically are going to be coming up next, right? But all of that is, of course, going to be verified as we go, and it's going to be adapted to the current situation of the market, to the product, the team, everything basically that is happening. So I always have a longer term idea and a plan of how things would probably go, maybe beyond a year. But the details of that, they're coming later, and this also can change. And for me, this is very much also connected to the strategy. So what is the strategies that we have in the moment? I think when we are reassessing strategy and we decide to pivot, then of course that will reflect on the roadmap, right? So I think in that sense, it's hard to make a too long roadmap. And I think that's why teams and what Diogo said, we are ending up of like feeling comfortable of doing a plan for maybe 6 months where you can commit and be like more sure about it. But then later on, and even in a year and 2 years and 3 years, becomes a little bit more uncertain, seems to be too far.
Mm-hmm. A lot can come up in 2 years, right? The team will change in the environment we're in, for sure. We'll lose developers, gain developers. The company's objectives can change. The market will change, right? So while it's important to have a plan for that time frame, it's important as well to know that that plan will not happen, right? That will change. And that's not always an easy message to pass on to both sides, right? Either to management or to developers.
Yeah, I think it's very important to create that understanding in the team that this is not set in stone, and this is a living document, as we said. And basically, we have to be agile, and we have to be able to adapt to whatever happens and respond. And moreover, when we plan this roadmap, I think it has to be acknowledged by the entire team, and also we have to account and plan for a buffer, or how do we handle these situations when they happen, right? So maybe there is something that we know that we must really do in the year because it could be compliance or anything of that sort of very hard deadlines that we know that we can't escape that unless GDPR, for example, goes out of the window or something similar. But then there is like all of these other things that are a little bit more business related, more feature related, more user related, something based on feedback and market research that actually can change, right? So today you can have maybe a demand for a certain feature, but tomorrow turns out that your customers actually are not ready to use it. They can't spend the time to onboard or just test the feature. And then out of a sudden it's not that important. And that has happened, I think, at least to me, it has happened many times actually, where you have thought and you have actually data coming from different sources about a feature that it's fairly major, that it's really needed. You get it to like an MVP prototype, a stage where it actually could be used and tested in a maybe like a beta and test environment. And then actually your customers don't have the time for it, or maybe they don't want it that much. And then you're starting to reassess everything about it. It's like, but why did we even end up in that situation? Yep. Why did we plan it and so on? But that's again, like the information at the time was different. And then in 3 months, situation changed for the customers. It changed apparently for us as well after that.
I think you raise a very interesting point in that your roadmap doesn't exist in a vacuum as well, right? Your roadmap will very frequently be dependent on other people's roadmaps, be it, as you mentioned, regulators, be it other internal teams that you depend on, external teams that you want to work with as well. And now you have not only to create your roadmap, but to align your roadmap with these other roadmaps to make sure that you're speaking the same language, in a sense, same time frame, same level of granularity, and then make sure that they are aligned in time, right, temporally, so that they finish what they need to finish when you want to pick it up, or vice versa. And that's also a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm wondering, like, have you came across anything that it worked for you in terms of, I guess, achieving that alignment, also being able to collaborate with the different people or stakeholders that you actually have to bring in when you make the roadmap?
No, it's a sorry, it's an ongoing exercise, right? So for me personally, it is a personal endeavor, and even though we say most times that what we do at work is just work, is just professional, those relationships are still personal, right? So there's been obviously people with whom I've worked better and created better roadmaps and communicated better, and others whom not so much for one reason or the other, right? Um, and that ends up impacting the roadmaps and the work we do. And then I'm still honestly a little bit lost in the middle of that, is where I wouldn't say that I have a perfect formula to create a roadmap that works every time, right? So sometimes that formula changes a little bit, and sometimes the results are a little bit better than others.
But my personal roadmap is one that's highly opinionated because then you can use it the most. Like I feel like if you make roadmaps with now, next, later, then it's so vague. Like when is next and later? It doesn't really, it's not, it doesn't communicate anything, you know? You might as well not have it. But and also in a business setting, you have fiscal years, you have budgets, et cetera, et cetera. You need to hire people, you need to make decisions all the time. So therefore, the roadmap needs to also be opinionated. So the roadmaps I have made that I felt like have worked the best in organizations have been with strict times, not so much features, but business objectives that's been taken from the overall strategy or is aligned to the strategy, but then tells you when certain things will be delivered and also communicates what are kind of strict things and what are more stretched things. Because if you make it super time specific, like it's like setting smart goals, right? If you make your roadmap smart, I feel like you can get much more interesting conversations about what is important, what should we prioritize, and how. And if your roadmap ends up not being the reality, you can have conversations about the capacity of the team. The velocity doesn't reflect reality as well, right? Like what you want to achieve. So therefore, you cannot be so overambitious. So at least that's the ones I've had the most luck with. They're also by far the most the ones that are used the most against you, as you're saying, Diogo, right? Because like when you're so opinionated, you have to stand up and take all those shots about the decisions you're making and the rationale for things. But the conversations are just so much better.
I understand what you're saying. That seems to be more of a top-down approach, right? So you're
Yeah.
determining what needs to happen, and then you're managing your team in order to get that to happen, which implies that you have the liberty to do that. And as product owners, product managers, that's not always the case as well, right? So you might not have the ability to impact what the size of your team is. So depending on what situation you're in, you might be kind of forced to work from a bottom-up approach where you know what the overall goals are, you take that to the team, and with them, you build what is possible, right? And then take that above. But as you said rightly, you are almost asking for approval for your roadmap rather than saying what you want to do. Yeah.
But that's fine. You're aligning with your stakeholders and also the business that ends up paying for it, right? So I think you can definitely do it bottom up. But I think if you do it bottom up, you have to make sure that there is some feedback coming from top down with the ones actually paying for everything and assigning the budgets, right? And you can either create your own and align it, or you can ask for one and get it and then create your own afterwards, right? But often I think we're in a situation where we don't get the roadmaps because even management have not been so strict about when they want to achieve certain things, right? Or at least it's not trickling down in the organization. There's some blocker somewhere.
That could be, and
I
that could
feel
be
like
from Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But no, Diogo, just make that point.
Yeah, I was going to say these blockers do exist, and they can exist for many reasons, right? Can be that the organization doesn't know, right? That happens. It can be that they maybe have a wish but don't know what is realistic, right? So they would like to have something at half the cost and double the time, and that's not really going to work. It could just be that people want to maintain their own fiefdoms and don't share information, which has also happened frequently. And all of this then, as you say, impacts your ability to build that roadmap for sure.
I think I was listening now, trying to understand, Sep, what you mean. I think there's something there that I'm probably misunderstanding. You are presenting this as that the roadmap has to be very there has to be kind of time frame. It has to be very goal oriented. You want to plan this long term as well, which for me, when you say it like that, it does give me a little bit the waterfall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what is a waterfall? It gives me the waterfall vibe.
Yes.
And then you also said that you're not really like you don't really enjoy too much the now later in the future and so on, like that way of planning. But I just have a question, like how far are you able to do something? How, like, are you able to do this beyond 1 year? Because I think 1 year is probably like the maximum you could do, and probably somewhat stay true to it and chase these objectives and try to deliver that. But later on, I feel like it will always be better to kind of put it in a box of like, this is next, this is later, to do this high level prioritization. And then, of course, you continuously go over that and be like, okay, well, is this what we want to have to do next based on what happened before?
So
I think,
can I try to answer just to make sure that I understood, and then you'll just clear us up all up?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I think, Elena, what I understood, and why I didn't link it so much into waterfall is because of the granularity level, right? So I don't think we're going into a lot of details about what needs to happen, but rather goals, and that leaves the details open for the team to sprint by sprint define, right? And the other part of the question about the time frame, for me, philosophically, I'm very much aligned with this, right? Because what I'm hearing is I'm going to commit myself to something, and I have the liberty to make that happen, whatever the time frame is, right? So if I say this is going to happen in 1 year, that in 2 years, and the other thing in 3 years, that is going to happen because I'm going to make it happen, not because I can or cannot or circumstances. I'm going to have the liberty to gather the resources, to gather the team around me that will make that happen. Is that more or less what you intended, Seb?
Yeah, and I think the granularity level is spot on, because then it becomes less waterfall, because you're not setting all the requirements up front and then you're delivering. The reason why. So imagine this: we're role playing a little bit, right? You have $1 million you're giving to a startup, and you want return on investment. So they're not going to achieve everything, so they need more funding at some point, right? Then you need them to hit certain targets, so they meet their evaluation targets, so you don't lose your money, right? In order to do that, and it's costing you. There's a one runway for having the team, right? So you need to be able to measure if they're able to meet their targets, or they will need more money. You should stop giving them money because they're not able to perform, right? And as the product manager as well, you need to be able to communicate how far are we from delivering that. So that's why it needs to be time specific. And this worked in a startup situation where you're getting money from externals. But even if you're building your own product, all the decisions management are making are about money, right? There's money to all. There's some cost to all this stuff, and yeah, you could have management that doesn't. Maybe the product is generating money, and you're just adding features to it, so you're growing the user base or whatever. But you're not measuring how fast that is, right? You don't know how much you're getting for your money. So that becomes then a matter of how management is. From, are they very goal oriented? Do they need data? Do they want to quantify these things, or are they okay with it happening more organically, right? And I think it depends on the people that are running the business, and maybe also the culture. But do you see it? Do you see, if you see it from the investor perspective, do you then see why I would prefer having it much more specific? Because then you can actually measure whether or not you're hitting your targets, and if you're not, you can make an active decision. Whereas if things stay in the future, it's going to happen next when, like what you said, Diogo, right? Oh, there's that feature. There's always 6 months away, but we're never going to achieve it, right?
Yep.
I see, and I completely agree. And I think when you have a sort of objective, and you know you have the specifics, right? It obviously, this is on high level, but like you have set a target, or you have an objective, then I think that works out. But I don't think you always are clear on that. And I think there is a lot of innovation, or like is a lot of understanding the market things happening on the side in order for you to be able to create those objectives and make the plan, right? So I'm just somehow like questioning how long term you're able to do that. And I understand that investors would be really into probably seeing the next 25 years so that they feel secured. But I think that's really unrealistic, especially in our days. And the way how I actually really understand this, and I think you did not say the word, Seb, but you're talking about the North Star metric, really.
Yeah.
So every initiative, anything that you do on the roadmap and you put on the roadmap, you have to be able to somehow measure that this is contributing to achieving your ultimate goal, and that is the vision, right? So if you want to be the top e-commerce platform on the market, your North Star metric will be at a like amount of purchases you have done in a day, or whatever. It could be something else, doesn't really matter, right? So anything that you do, it has to be increasing the likelihood of people buying and buying and buying. So I think now, like we've talked about, but I think that I'm understanding now more like this, rather than having this very this longer term, very specific plan. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just I'm trying to kind of
yeah.
I see what Seb was saying as well, and maybe that works a little bit better for startups, right? In the sense that you kind of need this plan. Something as big as a Coca-Cola company, maybe that makes less sense from a company perspective, maybe from a business unit perspective. But what I meant was, this is also important in a sense of assessing the team's capability to plan, to think ahead, right? I don't really care if you are spot on, but the fact that you can think of the next 20 years and see what the market might do and plan for that is impressive. And if you can do that, then you can adjust when those things change. If you can only think about the next year and a half, then maybe you're not the person that I want to be investing in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
but I mean,
you can estimate how much time things take, right? I think that is hugely important, and you can slice it in specific ways, if need be. If you want someone in charge of a team, you want those people to being able to estimate work realistically and forecast and have an idea of where we're headed towards. I completely agree.
Would you say regarding that estimation that is exclusively the work of the product owner manager, or what is the weight of the team lead, the tech team lead on taking that decision?
There's so many different ways to do this estimation. It really depends. I think that's a whole new topic for another podcast. Yeah.
I'll send you my calendar. We can book it.
Yes, please.
It is, and I think we are running out of time, but maybe to finish this up, what are the trends that you see in working with roadmaps? Is there anything that you think particularly is coming up or came out in the last couple of years?
Not that I know of. So I know you have some trends, Elena, so you'll be able to tell us afterwards. I'm either not as attentive to it as I should be, or I'm very comfortable with how things are right now, how I'm working right now, right? I haven't been looking to new things. I say roadmap. Unfortunately, I see this trend of having this more static 1-year roadmap, which I think doesn't benefit most of the people who do it. But that's really the only thing I see.
What about you, Seb?
There's always been this gap between the day-to-day work of the team and then whoever is managing. And the further up you go, the more it becomes slides and the more it becomes static and the more there's different versions and you're not sure which version is the right one. So I was actually quite thrilled when Jira finally had the roadmap feature within Jira, right? So you didn't have to do your roadmap out of Jira or use some plugin, because in order to have a dynamic roadmap, you need to have data, and Jira only had that breakdown, or these things are very short. It's like sprint by sprint or something shorter. So I think having the connection between having your goals and your vision and having it closer to the tools you're using in your day-to-day in your teams is super valuable. And I feel like the softwares are changing now, so they're becoming more strategic or taking advantage of some of these tools. So I think that's a good trend to have. So it's management is closer to the data and they see how the team is behaving and performing, and they realize sometimes how much time you actually take out of a team just by having a 4-hour town hall, how expensive that actually is.
Yeah.
And then also the team understands more the overall strategy and vision and why we need to plan ahead if it's more active tool and it's closer to them, right? So I think that for me, I was quite thrilled when Jira started adding some of these features.
I think I can only add to that I think this started happening. I don't know why, but I think it's a movement from the market, or basically movement from bottom up movement in a way, from product managers and people working in product, that they actually want to be able to share a living document and not have slides, because I think we've all suffered from, whatever management business side has slides and a very static roadmap, and then people like us, we are doing it somewhere where it's actually something more dynamic. And so that's why I think the tools that are coming up, and they have came up in the recent years, they are targeting exactly that, is to be able to centralize and have one place where you can modify and share it, both with development but also with business and externally to customers if you have to. So I do see that as a movement in the last few years, and I think it's something hopefully coming from both sides, like not only from board managers but from the ambition to be able to stay up to date.
Spot on. Completely agree. And we forgot to talk about that, how important it is to get that feedback from stakeholders and get the feedback for features before we build them. So it's spot on, definitely.
Or to check the willingness to buy that feature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So market research the features and so on. That could be its own conversation.
That's a different conversation. And I think, and this is super funny, is that we do so much discovery and research and discovery, but then we forget to do the willingness to buy. And then you launch it and it's like, it's great, we want to use it, but do we want to buy it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but sure. That's great, guys. Thank you very much for joining. I think we do have a lot of other topics that we can discuss, so I'm looking forward to see you next time. And thank you again.